This is Google Meet Plus. Again, I'm Kristen Garlitz with EdTech. I'm going to start by talking about the best ways to create meets. I know we've been teaching through Google Meet for the last 4 or 5 months. We've all been using them extensively. There are different ways to create meets, pros and cons to all of them. So if you're using meets with students, the top 2 ways to do it is to either create a nickname meet or to use the Google Meet code that's in Classroom. You do not want to use Calendar. When you use meets that are created through Calendar, Chat, or Gmail, those are active, those links are active for 90 days past the time the last person leaves. So that means that students can get into those meets without an adult present. So you want to make sure that you're not using Calendar, Chat, or Gmail meets with students, as they can come in and have little meet parties with their friends outside of school hours. Using a nickname meet or a Google Classroom meet means that they're deactivated after the teacher leaves, and then the students can't get back in. So that's a nice safety and security. Just like you would want to lock your classroom door and make sure you're the last one out of the classroom physically, it's the same way with Google Meets. To create a nickname meet, it's actually super easy. You just type in g.co/meet/ and then whatever nickname you want. It can be your last name. It can be, a code that you use with your students. It can be a series of letters or numbers. That's basically how the Google Classroom meets work. They're nickname meets. They just have that code with all the random letters and dashes. And then you can give your students the nickname and say, just go to meet.google.com and type in your last name or whatever your nickname is. But if you're the first one in, then it's your nickname meet and you have the host controls. So a nickname meet is really helpful for that. When you have host controls, as I'm sure you've noticed, you notice you have host controls if you've got this little blue shield in the bottom left corner. So if you don't have that, a couple of things might have happened. You're not using a Google Classroom meet or a nickname meet that you created. Somebody else created the meet, and then they would have those host controls. If you are the only adult in the room or the first adult in the room, you should have those host controls. Students should never be allowed to have host controls. That's how APS has set it up. But when you have those host controls, you can mute or remove participants, which is helpful. You can prevent students from rejoining. If you kick them out, they then have to ask permission to come in. You can re-invite people you've kicked out, and you can approve or deny requests to join. So if you've got like a guest speaker, a student teacher, a professor from UNM, you have to have host controls in order to allow them into the meet. So if you've got a student teacher who's been helping you out, they may not be allowed to invite their professor to come watch them unless they have the host controls. So they have to be the one to create the meet in order to get the host controls. If you've noticed you've never had these host controls, you may not be in the right OU, which means operational unit or something like that, or you may not have an enterprise account. So in that case, you need to make sure that you have an enterprise account. And I'm going to have a question form I'm going to provide for you later. So if you're not seeing this ever, the shield ever, when you create your meets, I'll have a form for you to fill out and ask a question, and we can get you an enterprise account. You'll also only get the attendance reports if you have the host controls. So if you've got more than one teacher that are co-teachers in your classroom, that other teacher may be getting those attendance reports at the end of meets. Attendance reports also only happen for Meet if you have 5 or more participants. So if you're doing, let's say, after-school tutoring and only one student shows up, then that attendance report won't happen. So then you'll have to think of another way to get that attendance from after-school tutoring, just as an example. Meet etiquette, at this point, I'm sure we're all very good at this, but it's nice to have a set of rules so that students know what is accepted behavior. One way to do that is to do flash norms, where you have your students help you write the rules, just like you can have students help you write rules during class. What are the appropriate behaviors we should have when we're on Meet? Have them type it into the chat or on a Jamboard. And then you've got all of your rules together that you've created. So hopefully they are better at following them. We also have this Google Meet etiquette poster. There's a link here that you can open when I send you the link. And the poster's in English and in Spanish. So this is nice to post on your Google Classroom or your Seesaw class so that everybody knows what the rules are. All right, we're gonna talk a little bit about breakout rooms, because I know breakout rooms is one of the newer features and they seem maybe a little overwhelming sometimes, a little scary. There's actually a couple of different ways to accomplish breakout rooms. The first way to accomplish breakout rooms is to use the integrated breakout room feature that's now available on Google Meet, and it is available for all teachers who have enterprise accounts. Or you can use nickname meets, and there's pros and cons to using both of those. So we'll talk about nickname meets first. When you create a nickname meet, you can create as many as you want. So you could have Garlits 1, Garlits 2, Garlits 3, and then tell your students which room to go to. The pros to doing this are that you can have all of your tabs open with all of your meets at the same time. So what I have here on the slide deck are the directions for doing nickname meets. And then what you can do is send them or link them to a document like this, and then you could have your students join. So you could use nickname meets to create breakout rooms that have groups. So you could list which student goes to which room, and then down at the bottom here, make this picture that says click to join, make that a link. So what you do is you have your nickname meet, the g.co/meet/nickname, and then you do Command K or Control K, and then link this picture to that nickname. And you could call your nicknames whatever you want. You could call your groups whatever you want. Let's say you wanted to have breakout rooms by reading level. So you could have the Roadrunners and the Eagles, and the nicknames could match those groups. So you could say, Roadrunners, it's time to go to your reading group. Eagles, go to your reading group. And then what you could also do is link the main meet, your classroom meet, back up at the top so that they can always go back to it. Students can have more than one meet open on their computer at the same time also. If they are running Chromebooks, it does slow things down quite a bit. So just be aware that if they've got two meets running at once, the main classroom meet and their breakout meet, it will slow things down. So some requirements for nickname meets is that if you're using those for breakout rooms, they work on everything. They work on Chromebooks, laptops, phones, iPads. All of those can access nickname meets. However, only APS accounts can access nickname meets. So if you're doing a breakout room activity and you wanted to invite a guest speaker from outside of APS, this would not be the way to do that, because that outside of APS person won't be able to get in. The other requirement is that the teacher must open the Meet link first. Students cannot create Meet links. They cannot open their own meets. They have to join. So you'll have to set up all of your nickname meets ahead of time, open them all up, and then mute them all and turn off your camera on all and have them up so that students can join them. That's nice if you want to be able to watch what your students are doing at all times. Pop in and out. This would be closer to if you were physically in the classroom and you had your students grouped up at tables and you could walk around the room and easily hear and see what everybody is doing at once. Some of the cons to nickname meets running your breakout rooms this way is that it does get a little noisy. Just like a physical classroom, if you've got 30 kids all talking at once and you've got breakout rooms with everybody talking, there's a lot of noise that can come from your computer. So pros and cons to doing a nickname meet. The other way to do a breakout room is to use the integrated breakout room that is in all Google Meets. And if you're not seeing this, that means you're not in the teacher OU, and you need to request that, and I'll send the form to do that. You would go to this little symbol. It's called the activities link. I don't know. And then you would set up breakout rooms this way. When you do it this way, you can create up to 100 breakout rooms at once. The participants are all randomly moved into place. So if you're going to do that and you wanted to have like set reading groups, you would have to then physically click and drag the students into their groups. So I think this breakout room is better if you're doing just the random grouping. You don't necessarily have like a set list of students that go together. So you can click and drag students into their breakout rooms. You can also just shuffle by clicking the shuffle button and it'll rearrange them again. And then you click to open the room. You can also set a timer. That's a nice feature with the integrated breakout rooms that's not available if you use nicknames. And then the students get a message to return when their time is up. Students can also raise their hand in the breakout room, and the teacher sees that somebody has a question in one of the rooms. You'll get that notification on your computer screen no matter which of the breakout rooms you're in, either the main meet or one of the side breakout rooms. So then the students can ask questions and the teacher knows that's going on. The breakout rooms inside of Google Meet now also work with iPads. That's a fairly new option. They weren't working with iPads at the beginning of the year, but they are now. So if you've got like an EA and you're in kindergarten and you wanted to send half your kids to a breakout room with your EA, you could now do that inside the breakout room. As we know, the littles they have a hard time switching from, link to link, meet to meet. So using that might be helpful if you're working with an EA and wanted to have two groups. I've seen that done with kindergarten before. So breakout room requirements. The teacher does have to have host controls, moderator controls. If you don't, you can't open the breakout room. So for example, if you and an EA are on the meet at the same time and the EA has the host controls, they'll have to be the one to open up the breakout room. You cannot enter a breakout room through a phone. So if you do have students who are accessing school through their phones, they won't be able to join a breakout room. These breakout rooms do work with all participants. They don't have to be APS people. So if you were inviting a guest speaker or having a professor from UNM come or whatever to observe their student teacher, then this would be the way to do a breakout room where your guest speaker could be in a room with students. We have had issues with students who are on iPads not being able to get into the breakout rooms. There's two things that may need to happen. They may need to update their iPad. So they need to go into their settings and then update. And then they can re-enter the meet. That's generally what happens when students on iPads are unable to get into the breakout rooms. The other issues is that teachers need to use newer meet codes. So if you've been using the same meet code since August, that old meet code has the old rules and tools available. So you won't necessarily see breakout rooms if you've been using the same meet since August. Okay, same with the other tools such as the question feature or the poll feature. So like I said, there's pros and cons. I've created this handy dandy little chart so that you can think about which ways would be best for me to create the breakout rooms. They both have pros and cons. The pros to using the integrated breakout rooms in the Google Meet is that they're the easiest way to move students. You can set a timer. You can use them with non-APS people. Students can re-enter the main room whenever. So they can go to their breakout room and then click a button to go back to the main room to ask a question, and then click a button to get back to their breakout room. There's no worries about muting if you're using the integrated breakout room. Again, using the physical classroom as the example, this would be like sending students to the hallway to work. So you've got more physical space. You don't have to worry about hearing everybody all at once. Some of the cons is that it doesn't work with phones. The teacher can only be in one room at a time, which does make it harder to monitor student activity. We often know that we send students to group work and they're like, what am I supposed to be doing? And so you're not able to hear that up front. So if you're using the integrated breakout rooms, it's best to make sure that you're giving really clear directions so they know exactly what to do once they get there. It's also time consuming to move the kids manually from room to room. You cannot set up the integrated breakout rooms ahead of time. You have to wait until all your students are in the meet and then pop them into place. So that does waste a little bit of your synchronous time. For the nickname meets, the pros are that the teacher can set up the groups ahead of time. So if you're using a set groupings, like for reading groups or whatever, this is better if they go to the same meet every time. You can create clickable links for students and then post those links to Classroom or Seesaw. It can be easy for students to memorize nicknames. I've worked with some teachers who use nickname meets, and their students just know to type in their last name on Meet and they get there quickly. You can reuse nickname meets for multiple class periods or days. That's actually one of the cons to the breakout rooms that are integrated. If you, let's say you have the same meet that's open all day, period 1 comes in, then period 2 comes in, you still see all those period 1 kids as well as the period 2 kids in the breakout rooms. So if you're gonna use them with students, just make sure that if you've got period 1, period 2, period 3, you've got different meet links for each of those classes. The teacher approach to the nickname meets is that teachers can have the meet, all the meets open, so the teacher is always present, you're always watching. And then you can close the meet when you're done to make sure that there's no stragglers. They're not hanging out waiting for you to leave so that they can have a meet party by themselves. Again, the cons are you can't use it with non-APS people. Students would have to navigate away, which we know can cause issues if they're not great at clicking on links, or pre-reading students, things like that. And then the teacher has to be the first one in and have all the meets open. So that can be a lot to manage depending on how many meets you have, how many rooms you have. So it can be kind of noisy. So those are the pros and cons. Do you guys have any questions? Does anybody want to unmute and ask a question about the different ways to do breakout rooms? I see one question in the chat. When you set up meets in advance using Calendar, students can actually access those meets outside of class time. They can get in and have a little meet party in the evening with their friends. And so it's not recommended for safety and security reasons. You know, we don't want students having a little meet party and then sharing inappropriate stuff, and then parents complaining that the teachers are allowing their students to do this. Obviously, it's not your fault if they do decide to do that outside of school hours, but whatever we can do to prevent that, just like you would lock up your classroom at the end of the day. So that's why we're not recommending using calendar meets with students. All right. We're going to go ahead and talk about different ways to do breakout room stations and activities with them. Real quick, I see Kara's question in the chat. As a PE teacher, if you're not the one setting up the class meets, you don't have host control, so you can't set up the breakout rooms yourself. The classroom teacher could help facilitate that. I know that does tend to be their prep time, and so they usually leave. So it's a communication you'll have to have with your school. If you want to set up breakout rooms, you have to have host controls, which means you need to create those meets. So if you're an EA, a co-teacher, an electives teacher, and you usually just jump on the teacher's meet, you won't have that ability. You'll have to have your students log out of their classroom meet and log into your PE meet in order to do breakout rooms. And it is kind of a pain. We are desperately waiting for Google to finish their update. They promise that one day you'll be able to transfer host controls. It's up to Google when the transfer of host controls update gets done. It'll probably be like, you know, July, because that's how they work. All right. Breakout room virtual stations is one option. When I send you this training document, this is actually a link. You can actually click here and there's an entire lesson about how to do virtual stations. So you can use breakout rooms to mimic or replicate what you would do in the classroom. You could have a teacher-led station where students are working with a teacher doing skill building or troubleshooting. You could have an online station where students maybe work together to research and explore or do online collaboration. You can have an offline station where students are present, but they're doing things on their own individually. So this is a great way visually to set it up to have different rotation stations for breakout rooms. Another option is to have a workroom. This helps your students have more choice in how they work. So you can say, hey students, we're gonna go into breakout rooms. You decide which room you want to be in. Do you wanna be with me so that I can help you? Maybe give some more one-on-one support. Do you wanna be in an open room with mics on and cameras on, where everybody can talk together and work together as a big collaborative group? Would you prefer to work in a quiet group room where you can ask questions through the chat so that they're not talking, but they're able to communicate with each other? Or would you like to work individually in a quiet room? This would be cameras off, mics off, but they're present so that they can be accounted for attendance and then work independently. And then this is a slide that you could turn into a PDF and post on your classroom, and then make each of these doors into a link. So it's like a virtual classroom, kind of like a Bitmoji classroom. So what you can do is create a box on top of each of these doors and then link your meets. So this is one way to do nickname meets with a rotation room. This document's also in Spanish, so this is nice to have. You could consider doing breakout rooms by topic. Maybe you wanted to try some cross-curricular lessons. This was a lesson created by CNI about Perseus, and if you click on the picture, it links to the whole lesson. So let's say you've been doing a cross-curricular lesson and you wanted to have students pick by choice. So students could choose to continue the lesson and learn more about history and go into the breakout room and watch a video about the history of the sculpture of Perseus. And then the group could prepare to share something with the larger group that they learned about the history. Maybe you have students who are interested in fine art, so they could go into a breakout room and read an article about the sculpture, and then prepare a presentation for the bigger room. So this would be like a jigsaw where you have students break out and then come back together and teach each other. So a cross-curricular breakout room by topic would be interesting. You could have them review vocabulary, do research in math. There's a lot of different ways that you can take one idea and then break out into the different curriculums so that they get a little piece of everything. So you could use breakout rooms to do jigsaws. Something important for when you're doing breakout rooms is to consider student roles for participation. You want to make sure that students know what is expected of them, what roles they have, what tasks they have, and then time limits. So just like you would have in the physical classroom, you can consider using student tasks. Maybe you have somebody who's the manager, somebody who's the recorder who does the writing or the drawing, the spokesperson whose job it is to come back to the main group and present to the class. The reflector, maybe somebody who writes down a couple of sentences about what they learned. The encourager, the pep talk cheerleader. The questioner who keeps asking those questions to make sure that they're going deeper. Or even the checker, somebody who double checks the work to make sure it's correct. So depending on how many students you have per group, you can have a lot of different roles, but it's nice to give students roles so that they know what's expected of them. Time limits are great too. If you want to say you have exactly 10 minutes to do this, come back at, and then give them a specific time. That's helpful if you're using the nickname Meet breakout rooms. If you're using the integrated breakout rooms in Google Meet, you can set the timer and then they get a message at the end to come back. But it's nice to tell them up front how many minutes you're giving them to work on the activity. All right, we're gonna go ahead and practice. I have a Jamboard that I'm gonna have you guys click on. If you haven't used Jamboard yet, it's a really great tool. It's super easy for students to learn the tools. I have kindergartners at home myself, and I just opened up, oops, that's the wrong link. I just opened up a blank Jamboard and said, have at it. And my 5-year-olds were able to figure out how to use all the tools on their own. And then they decided that they wanted to start looking up pictures. And so they started asking how to spell words. And so now we're using it to spell to look up pictures using Google Jamboard. All right, so I shared a Jamboard in the chat. What I'm going to have you guys do here in a moment is I'm going to send you to a breakout room. We're going to practice using the integrated breakout rooms. Once we're in the breakout rooms, you're going to decide who is the spokesperson for the group, who's the timekeeper, and who is the artist. So, and if there's more than 3 people in a room, because I'm going to have to with the numbers we have here, let's just practice and know that this is something we would have to consider with our students. On the Jamboard, there are 19 blank frames with a squiggle on it. And what your job is to pick one that hasn't been picked by another group. And don't write on this yet. Let's wait till we get into our breakout rooms. But I'm glad to see so many of us clicked on the link in the chat and have joined the Jamboard. Pick a blank one with your group, add a sticky note with your group member names, and then complete the drawing. So this is an SEL style lesson to get to know each other, to be creative, to think outside the box. So your group is going to take this squiggle and turn it into a drawing. Make it into something, whatever it is. Make it school appropriate, please. This is being recorded. So those are your rules, is that when you're in your breakout room, you're going to pick a spokesperson, a timekeeper, and an artist. You're going to pick a frame on the Jamboard, and then you're going to follow the directions that are on the first frame of the Jamboard in order to complete the steps.
I don't mean to interrupt, but there are too many people and we can't do the Jamboard.
Okay. Should have done more than one Jamboard. All right. Well, let's see if we can have the link open and just have like maybe one person per team. Let me go ahead and set up the breakout rooms. And I'm going to do this while in present mode so that you can see what it looks like for those of you who haven't started a Jamboard yet, or a breakout room yet. So I'm going to click on the 3 little shapes here, the activities. This might be slow. It's very slow. All right. So then you click on breakout rooms. Oh my goodness. When you've got a normal size class of like 30 students, this should go a lot faster. We just have, what, 154 people in here? Hopefully that's bigger than most of you are dealing with your students. It automatically set up 38 breakout rooms with 4 people in each room. I think that sounds perfect. I'm going to go ahead and set the timer. I'm going to set it here so you can see what it looks like. We've got 20 minutes left, so I'm going to go ahead and set this for 4 minutes, maybe. So that we can just practice. And it's okay if you guys don't actually get to the drawing part. You know, this is just an activity that you could do with students, but since we've got so very many people, obviously this isn't going to work as well as if you've got you know, 30 students and 5 breakout rooms. So this is going to be a little slower. Let's just do the best we can. So once I click this open room, you'll get a message to go to your breakout room. When the 4 minutes is up, you'll get a message to come back. If you want to try raising your hand and seeing what that does, please feel free. I won't necessarily be able to get into all 38 rooms if you all raise your hand, but please feel free to check out the different tools from the student's perspective, since you're now my students, quote unquote. And then if somebody can open up the breakout, Jamboard, you actually can present from inside a breakout room. So the one person who can open it, go ahead and present it to the group. I know this is a really quick activity, so just do the best you can to learn the Jamboard tools and think about breakout rooms and how they might work with your group, your content. Sound good? Any questions before I kick you out of here? All right, and I will be in the main room, so like a student, you can pop back into the main room if you've got any questions. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and open the rooms now. So hopefully you all saw the message to come back. Hopefully clicking over and clicking back was pretty easy. From a student's perspective, you know, it should be pretty easy. You can, when you're using the integrated breakout rooms, you can name the room, so it's not just breakout room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can end them on your own at any point, and then they'll get the message to come back. It does look like we have lost some people since the breakout room started, so I'm not sure if they're still in there. Just because Google says that they can do it up to 1,000 people or whatever, doesn't mean it's necessarily best practices. So I wouldn't try to do breakout rooms with like all of your students if you're a high school teacher, because clearly it's not going to work as well as a single class period. To name breakout rooms, that's a question I see on the chat. When you go to set them up, let me see if I can present. I'm not going to send us out to breakout rooms again, but I just wanted to show you. And if not, we might just have to move on. When you click the Set Up Breakout Rooms button and you choose how many rooms, where it says breakout room 1, 2, 3, you can actually click on that and rename that right there. So that is how you rename the breakout rooms. So then you could give them your group names. If you've got like elementary kids and you see the same 20 or 30 kids every day and you have them memorized for who goes into which group, you could probably get pretty quick about using the integrated rooms and having your set groupings. As a high school teacher, I was never that organized and could never remember who was in which group.
I had a question about presenting in breakout rooms, and someone answered in the chat that the kids can present, but can I present in all of the different breakout rooms?
Unfortunately, you can't push out the same presentation to all of your breakout rooms. That just doesn't work. If you wanted to do a nickname meet and have your 4 or 5 tabs open, you could then open up the same presentation in all 4 or 5, but you couldn't necessarily. That's weird. You couldn't necessarily move through the presentation.
I see. I was thinking along the line, I'm a PE teacher, and I was thinking along the lines of stations and doing different activities. So that was kind of where I was going with that.
All right, we'll move to the end of the presentation. We'll talk about some Meet games.
You're presenting now.
Yay! Okay. All right. So collaborative documents, I've got a few more links here of some interesting ideas to think about using for breakout rooms. Jamboard is one way. Obviously, it does get busy with that many people in all at once. And then telling students which frame to go to can be kind of a pain. So think about how you can use Jamboards to maybe have like one per group instead of one for everybody. You can also use docs, forms, slides, and Pear Deck to do collaboration within your groups. There's a link here for a nonfiction graphic organizer, which would be good for reading nonfiction articles in English, history, science. Bernadette, that's a great question. If you get kicked out of your Meet and you lose the chat, you'll only get to see the chat if you're recording. So if you're recording it, it will save everything from the beginning of the recording, but that's a great question. There's a Freyer model, which is a vocabulary graphic organizer. All content areas use vocabulary. So having students work on vocabulary collaboratively in a breakout room and complete a graphic organizer about a vocabulary word, it's a great way to consider collaboration in breakout rooms. And then this is a SIFT example, which is a graphic organizer from English. So there's a different way to do group work, group collaboration during a breakout room. So the other Meet tools, there's the polls and the questions. The Q&A is great for allowing students to ask their questions in a place that will be maintained. So these questions that you allow on the Q&A will show up and not get lost in the chat. I know I have a hard time following along the chat, and sometimes questions just they move up the chat and then you never see them. Another thing I like about the Q&A is that students can upvote. So if they have the same question, but they don't want to be the one to ask it, they can upvote it. And then as a teacher, you can see which questions they have that are the most important to answer. As a teacher, you can hide them if they ask something inappropriate, and you can also mark them as done, as in I've already answered that question. So when you go to the 3 little shapes activities tool, you can turn on Q&A and allow your students to ask questions. Polls is a great way to do formative assessments, check-ins. You can set up the questions ahead of time. So you log into the Meet, set up all your poll questions with your multiple choice answers, and then you can launch them when you're ready. So this might be a way to do check-in questions about the content throughout the lesson. You could use it just to ask a quick, how are you doing? How much did you understand of the lesson? Do some sort of check-in with students throughout the lesson. Backgrounds is another tool that all students and staff should have access to in Google Meets. I will warn you, backgrounds slow things down. So if your students are using Chromebooks and they've got 15 other tabs open, the backgrounds will slow down their computer to the point that they won't even work. But if you've got students who are really shy and don't like having the camera turned on because they're embarrassed about what's happening behind them, using a background might be a way to get them to turn on their cameras. Susan asked, can you save and reuse polls? No, unfortunately. That would be really smart of Google to do. But you can have them, once you've launched them, it doesn't matter how many students you have. If at least one student answers, you'll get the email with all of the polls and Q&A questions afterwards, just like you get the attendance report. So then you could copy and paste them. So you could have them saved like on a doc, just copy and paste from the doc over to the polls. All right, so some engagement games, because something fun to end with is always good. I found 2 links to websites with like dozens and dozens of games. This one is specifically for kindergarten, but could work great for, you know, pre-K 1, 2. All the young students really enjoy those. And then this link are for older kid games, more general games. But the 2 we're gonna practice playing are Waterfall and Cameras On and Off. So Waterfall works that you think about the question or prompt, answer the question or prompt, but you don't click send until the teacher tells you to. So for your students who are feeling very shy and they don't want to ask a question or answer a question because they're afraid they're the only one, Waterfall is great because all of the answers show up at once. And so they can kind of feel like they get lost in the herd in a good way. So what I'm going to do is on the next screen, I'm going to show you a question. You're all going to think for some time, type in your answers, but don't click send until I say to click send. Okay? So then what you can do as a teacher is think about the commonalities between the answers or the differences. So you could use it either way. It could be used for a content area question, or it could be used for something to get to know your students. All right, so don't click send yet, but go ahead and start typing in your answer. Which is the best superhero and why? And you don't have to pick one of those 6. I just found a lovely picture that I liked. We know there are dozens and dozens of popular superheroes right now. So just think about who is your favorite superhero and why. And then when the timer goes off, and I just found a video of a 30-second timer. When the timer goes off, then you'll click submit in the chat. All right, you ready? All right, so think about your answers. Go ahead and start typing. Don't click submit yet. All right, go ahead and click submit. Your question: Wonder Woman, Green Arrow, Thor, Cyclops, Spider-Man, Hulk. Lots of Wonder Women. I like that, girl power. Wolverine, Iron Man, Black Panther, Iron Man, Captain Marvel, Black Widow, Black Panther. So as you can see, when everybody clicks submit all at once, the answers just kind of zoom by, but nobody's singled out. So for students who are shy, this is a great way to encourage engagement without singling anybody out. And then you can go back through and read through them all together. So Waterfall is a fun way to get students engaged and make them think before they answer. The last game, oops, not that. the last game, and we only have a little bit of time for it because we're almost out. Come on. Our cameras on and off. So you start with everybody's camera off, and then you turn your cameras on if this applies to you. So this is a good SEL get to know your students game. You could also do it for answering questions about a text that they read if they agree or disagree. But I just thought we should think about things that we relax and foods that we like to eat because it's the end of break. And those were the two things that I did over break that I really enjoyed. We're relaxing and eating. So cameras on if you like reading a book. And then everybody would turn on their cameras if they relax by reading a book. And then you say, okay, cameras off. And everybody turns their cameras back off. And then you say, okay, cameras on if you like relaxing by getting outside or taking a walk. And then they turn their cameras on. So this is another great way to get to know your students, to have a little fun. This could be a little icebreaker warm-up activity at the beginning of class to get to know your students. All right, I am very much out of time. I will send you this presentation with all of the resources. I would like to thank you all for your time.
I have a question. Back in the breakout rooms, you had like different choices, like a workroom or by topics. Did you have to do that with the nicknames, or could you do that with the integrated one?
You could do that with the integrated ones, yeah. Instead of calling them breakout room 1, 2, 3, 4, you could call it teacher workroom, quiet workroom, collaborative workroom. You could give them names. The only problem is that students wouldn't be able to choose which breakout room to go into. They'd have to tell you, and then you'd have to click and drag their name down to the correct breakout room.
Okay.
So it would
so
work.
You actually did it the other way with the nickname one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And those are great then because you can just reuse them. So once you've created the document with your nickname meets, you can just reuse that document and reuse those nickname meets again and again. So it's more work up front, but then it works well over time.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have my hand raised, but I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, yes.
Somebody had a question earlier. Are we able to record the breakout room sessions as they are live, or
yeah, if you're using the integrated breakout rooms, no, a student would have to click record once they go into the breakout room, and then they would be the one that would receive the recording. If you're doing the nickname meet breakout rooms, then yes, you could record all of those.
and they're all saved within the same file as the main meet?
If you're doing breakout rooms by nickname meet, then you would get an email for each of those recordings. And then if you're doing the integrated breakout rooms, I guess a student could start them. And for secondary, you definitely could trust them too. I mean, they have the ability to start a recording. But then they would receive the email since they're the one that started the recording, and then they'd have to send it to you. So it would just be a bit of a pain.
Thank you.